I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here. Glad to have you along as well. Happy New Year to everybody, first and foremost. We've been on a sort of a best of routine for the past month, regrouping, rejuvenating, reconfiguring, reinventing the program, and we promise you're going to enjoy 2025 with the Conversation with Al McFarlane. As always, kudos to our partners and friends here at KFAI. Tuesday is our flagship program. Not only do we connect across the variety of platforms, social media platforms that we're on, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, but we also go live to an expansive audience here in Twin Cities and actually on the World Wide Web at kfai.org. So again, Happy New Year to all of my colleagues and friends, companions at KFAI, to all of the listeners here in KFAI world. And we want you to know that we appreciate you, we value you, we thank you for being a part of our conversation. We invite you to be a part of the conversation. What do you mean? You can join us by just sending an email from time to time or a text saying, what about this? What about that? It would be cool to have, person A, a person B, or issue A or issue B on the Conversation with Al McFarlane. We want to engage you, be engaged with you and by you in creating what we think can be robust programming, robust conversations, robust engagement. And again, we thank you. If you're listening on one of the social media platforms right now, you can be a part of the conversation by leaving a comment in the comment section. In fact, what we want you to do is take a minute to reach out to your networks and tell them that we're live, that it's going down right now here on KFAI FM 90.3, that it's going down across our social media networks, insightnews.com on YouTube, also on Twitter, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn. And we'll be developing new ways to use the technology to connect with you in the future. We're looking at how do we organize a podcasting system so that not only do we live stream on Tuesdays, but we also create other ways to get the content to you and into the marketplace over a longer period of time. Well, today I want to begin this new year by once again introducing what I think is one of the newest and brightest lights in my discipline, media communications, and that's a new columnist with Insight News who I met here on this program. Her name is Haley Taylor Schlitz. Haley's going to be hanging out with me for the hour. I'm going to call her. I didn't tell her this, but she's my co-host for today. Haley, good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
I'm actually excellent, and even more so because you're here. I've been bragging about you since we met, and just for the readers or the viewers that didn't know. Number one, Haley is a columnist for Insight News. She's fearless. She's got a bite. She's got a kick, and she's throwing down. And in many ways, she reminds me of a 22-year-old Al McFarlane, a dragon slayer, ready to change the world. And I think you'll pick that energy up as you get to know her on this program and as you check out her columns at insightnews.com or pick up the newspaper all around Twin Cities and get the physical copy, the newspaper. But Haley is cool and she's energetic and she's a lawyer. In fact, she's an assistant attorney general for the state of Minnesota Attorney General Office, and she's 22, I believe.
Yes.
Haley was the youngest woman to ever graduate with a law degree in our country, and the youngest African American woman as well to do the same. Homeschooled, parents who valued education and who would not settle for the limitations of organized school. And decided that their child could do more and they could give that child more, and they set about doing so for the benefit of the brilliance that they had been entrusted with, that brilliance being the personage of their daughter, Haley Taylor Schlitz. I hope your parents are listening, Haley, because I'm going to being embarrassing praising of you. I think I think that we have to do this with each other. I think that an elder like Al McFarlane, when he sees and comes across a young person, a young leader, like Haley Taylor Schlitz, has to say that this is what this is. This is my obligation and my duty to engage, to connect, to encourage, to challenge you, to be your best self, to bring your best voice, to move without doubt, except for the doubt that comes with introspection and reflection, and that's a good thing. But it means you go deep to research and to organize and to know and to understand.
Right.
Well, let me stop there and do two things. One is invite you to introduce yourself again. I've told your story and had you tell it on another one of our programs, our Friday program. But for the people that haven't met you here on Tuesday, introduce yourself, Haley Taylor Schlitz.
Yeah, well, again, thank you so much for having me. Yes, I'm 22 years old and I currently am an assistant attorney general. I love it. I've been up here in Minnesota for 6 months. So it's my first winter and, I'm toughing through it, especially coming from Texas. But no, I'm really happy to be here. Like you said, I am a columnist with Insight News, and I very much enjoyed just sharing my thoughts, my perspective, kind of just raising awareness on your platform with your expansive viewers. And I've really enjoyed our conversations. This is, I think, our third conversation together with various groups, various people. So I'm really happy to be here and have a good conversation, especially with the new year, like you said, what we can expect in the political rank, and also just what viewers can expect from my columns and kind of talking about what I've written so far and where I see it going. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here. You hit the nail on the head, and I'm excited for this conversation.
Well, you and I started because you were introduced to me as I reached out for surrogates for the Harris Biden team. They brought you forth, and yeah, I think you were on the screen or in the dark room. Said, "Who's this?" And you made it clear real quick who you were. But how did you get connected to the Biden-Harris campaign? How did you become identified as and presented and have the opportunity to present as a surrogate?
Yes, well, I've back in Texas, I was very politically active, just community engagement. And as I spend more time here in Minnesota and the Twin Cities, I'm finding my space to do that here too. But I have a lot of just connections and people that I've met along the way in Texas. And one person introduced me to another, and I got introduced to someone on the team of the Biden-Harris campaign. And so when you reached out to them, we had that connection, and they reached out to me. So it's really knowing people who know people.
hmm So, what were you involved with in Texas in politics? What was the nature? And I'm going to do two things. One, talk about exactly the question that I asked it, but what's behind the question is the growing up of Haley that made the political interest and involvement inevitable.
Yeah, absolutely. So my involvement, starting big picture and then getting into how we got there, my involvement was really what I'm trying to do here and now. I would be on different platforms, talking, sharing my perspective, raising awareness about the issues that I care about most: education, women's rights, Black Lives Matter type of things, and raising awareness in what I write as well. I did a lot of columns with different platforms like Blavity and things like that, the Grio, while I lived in Texas. So speaking and writing was a huge way that I would reach out to my communities and get involved and discuss the issues I care about most. And also I was involved in the community. So I worked on a lot of different campaigns as the youth advisor, just kind of giving an insight from a Gen Z perspective on how they can connect with the youth votes and get them out and hit points that relate with that audience. And also with elected officials already. So things like the Crown Act, I went and did press conferences on and raised awareness that way it could get passed into law in Texas. So other policy issues like that, things that really made a difference, like I said, in the areas that I care about most. So that's really how I would be active. And that kind of all started when I was 13 or 12 even. That's when I went to that's when I started homeschooling. Actually, was when I was 11, 12 years years old. So really just that kind of pivotal turn in my life where my parents realized what was the mainstream, what the status quo was, what they were trying to make work wasn't working. So that's kind of the shift into just focusing my education and my experiences on me as a person and what I needed. So when you homeschool, there's something that my mom has coined called the homeschool mindset, the homeschooling mindset, where you kind of take every opportunity as a learning opportunity. So if you go to the grocery store, you have your child tell you which of the two is the better deal, or if you're at the park, so it may sound like, I don't know, to especially younger people, like lame at first, but really it makes the education that you're getting more applicable to your day-to-day, more applicable to real life. And you really see these moving pieces that are sometimes very theoretical in the classroom come together. And so that's kind of where politics came into my life. A lot of the issues that I care about as a Black woman, but also as someone with the experiences that I had in education, were very close to home for me, very just something that I cared a lot about. And so with my dad being very prominent in the political realm as well, I turned to him, and he kind of just brought me along when he went to work, when he went to community events. And that's kind of where it started. I was just, with my dad, with some coffee and just some thoughts. And
Hmm.
that's kind of, it took off from there. So really starting young, and when I started homeschooling, it really became whatever opportunities existed, my parents took advantage.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm talking with our guest, who I'm presenting as co-host today. She's Haley Taylor Schlitz. She's a new Minnesotan. As she said, this is her first winter here. She's been here 6 months. Enjoy the winter, learn to ski and ice skate,
Right.
and the mindset has to be cold as fun, because
Right.
then it will be, right? Never, so move fearlessly through it and with it. Embrace the spirit of the cold. So, and then thanks to Michelle, who's a regular supporter and commenter here, and others who are joining or may join on any of the platforms, either YouTube or Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn. We appreciate your comments. Leave a comment. Let us know where you're watching from. And if you have a question or comment, we want to acknowledge that. Michelle, again, thank you so much. Haley, you talked about, 13, 12 years old, and I'm 77, right? But this conversation reminds me of being a 12-year-old when my cousins and I and our families were involved in the NAACP in Kansas City. We were active, as far as I knew, for as long as I was alive, right? And we were part of the Kansas City youth delegation that went to Atlanta for the national convention, I think in 1959. And there we were taught the tactics of civil disobedience, of protesting, and what to do when the police or the mobs attack you. We were taught by Roy Wilkins, who personally was giving instruction and direction and confidence to young people, but all of us, about the protest that we were going to be doing the next day downtown Atlanta, because hotels had refused to accommodate us, though we had arranged accommodations. And when we marched kind of in a circle, and opposite us were members of the Klan or of the Nazi Party. It was frightening, but exciting. And the point of it all is that I grew up with this attitude and excitement and awareness of the value of being active.
Right.
And it sounds like that's your story as
Right.
well.
It is.
Active, and that this is not only uh, it's not only an obligation, but it's a right, and it's a duty and a right.
Right.
So you mentioned your mom and dad. Tell us about
Right.
your family.
Yeah, no, I mean it's I mentioned them, and I'll start with my dad, since I kind of already touched on him a little bit. He spent the majority of his career being a campaign manager and chief of staff, and he spent a lot of that time in California. And after he graduated college, he worked for Congresswoman Barbara Lee and her staff, and other noteworthy figures. And so
Mhm.
he, like I said, he's definitely huge in
Do,
the political,
do
like,
you know Barbara Lee? Do you know
I
her?
do. She's my
Okay.
godmother. I do.
She's
Yes.
she's a cool person.
Very cool.
She's been here a few times, and
Very cool.
always with power.
Yes, that
Yeah,
that part. So she's a
yeah.
huge role model for me, and just as a Black woman, but also someone involved in politics. So love her, and I love seeing and hearing
And I
from
think
her.
when
And
she was here on behalf of your boss, Keith Ellison.
sees, there we
Yeah,
go. There we go.
yeah. See,
Small world.
yeah.
So yeah, that's my dad. Super connected, super involved. Just very a huge advocate and a role model for me in the political realm. I appreciate his advice and his guidance, and so that's my dad and his career. And my mom and her career, she's an emergency medicine physician, and just the biggest role model, the biggest pillar, the biggest tree for me as a Black woman. But of course, being my mom, but also as someone who's just educated and empowered, and just very, very innovative as well. So she, like I said, emergency medicine physician. That's what she's been doing with her career since she was in her 20s,
Hmm.
medical school residency, and then practicing it as emergency medicine physician. So she's awesome. I couldn't tell you what she does because I'm on the opposite side of career paths as her, being in law. I feel like they're so alike but so different. But yeah, I know her title, and always people be like, do you call her Dr. Taylor? And I'm like, sometimes yes, sometimes you put respect on the title. So
Certainly.
so yeah, that's them, that's their careers. They're awesome people, and just super loving, and they pay attention to me and everything I need and give me advice even when I
So,
don't think I want or need
so,
it.
so Haley at 5, 7, and 9, did you have fun? How did you have fun? How did the world look to you then? And as you matured and gained more knowledge about both your capacity to learn and to become yourself, how how has that becoming revealed itself in what you do, what you know, what you have joy about, and what offers a little trepidation from time to time, if anything? Maybe nothing does.
No, yeah, when I was young, some of my biggest hobbies were things that my parents introduced to me. So I've played the piano for 12 years now, and my mom's the one who chose that and to sign me up for the lessons, and I've loved it ever since. It's really where I go when I need some reprieve or just
You
kind
do
of,
classical or jazz
yes,
or
classical
classical?
music.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
classical music. So it's just beautiful, like a music box, and I love to just sit there and just let time fly as I play. So that's a huge hobby of mine. I love reading. There's a lot of reading that comes with being politically active, that comes
Mhm,
with being an attorney. So when I'm reading in my free time, I kind of like to go in the other direction and read things
mhm,
like fiction. I really like just kind of getting lost in worlds that aren't real. It's really fun.
mhm.
It's really different. So I enjoy that too, and
So
that's what I did
who are
growing
you
up.
reading? What have you read lately, and what
Yeah,
in memory jumps out as a sort of signature
right,
stories that allowed you
right.
to develop?
Right. Yeah. So for me, we also did spoken word a lot growing up. And so
Mhm,
one of the things that I used to love to read, I still do, but when I was young, it was something that I very much enjoyed reading because I would take inspiration and write my own poetry from it, was Maya Angelou. So
mhm.
I love When Great Trees Fall by Maya Angelou. It's my favorite poem by her. And yeah, I mean, so that's what I would read in my free time. And like I said, now too, I enjoy looking at poetry and just kind of exploring different artists and their words and their message. So that's definitely someone that I think I read her first poem when I was 10. So that exact age that you gave, and it was just a huge, it's just something growing up. Now I turn to her poems and I hear them when you're facing adversary, when you're facing
Mhm,
difficulties, or even when you're facing success. So
mhm.
that's what I like to read. Like I said, something that's different from the career reading or the heavy reading. So
And so how did you finish high school? At what age? What, 12, 13?
yes, I graduated when I was 13. Yeah.
13. How did that happen?
So it really was the homeschooling. I
Mhm,
was just right on track when I was in public school, and my parents pulled me out of public school when I was 11. So from ages 11 to 13, I went from just being in fifth grade and doing what fifth graders do
mhm,
to graduating high school at 13, and that change really was the homeschooling. I wasn't entirely homeschooled. I did a college style school is what they called it. So you go
mhm,
to a building with peers and I don't know, the whole nine yards, dances, whatever you can think of that comes
mhm,
with traditional school, but 2 days a week, and the rest of
mhm,
the time you're at home, which really did wonders for teaching me about time management and self accountability. And it also allows you to personalize and customize your education because it's not mainstream like you think think of public school. So in that field or in that space, I was my parents and I were able to do what I needed to do at the rate I needed to do it. So some people spend a year's worth of time on geometry, but I did that in 3 months. So you could kind of see how those things, the time starts to add up. And I graduated high school at 13.
And then law school, straight into undergrad, then law school,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Tell me about it, just a short version.
Yes, yeah. So I did 3 years of undergrad. The first year was at my local community college, which I loved. And then the last 2 years were at Texas Women's University in Denton. And then after I graduated undergrad at 16, I went into law school at Southern Methodist University in Dallas and graduated from that when I was 19. So that's my education.
That's amazing, you know. And then a little bit ago, you said, and it made me smile, Haley, you said, when I was young. So whenever I hear a 22-year-old say, when I was young, it blows me away. It's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing. It's wonderful to hear that. Well, let's talk about your writing. I think you pulled up one of your columns, and I want
Yes.
people to hear the column, the story in your voice, so that when they read your stories in the newspaper online, they'll be hearing your voice, how
Right.
you feel, how you inflect. So what do you have? What did you pull up?
Yes, so I have this column here that I'll read a part of, so that
Mhm.
way I can, recommend to the viewers to go and read the rest of
There
it
we go.
online.
There we go.
But yeah, this one is about Ramaswamy and Elon Musk and just the recent conversation about America and our practices. And so to dive right in, I'll read part of it here. They have always feared the power of an educated Black mind. This fear is woven into the fabric of our nation's history, from slavery, where it was illegal for enslaved people to learn to read, to segregation, which kept us confined to underfunded schools. That fear persists today, cloaked in new rhetoric and policies. Before the election, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and Vivek Ramaswamy pushed the lie that education in America was falling because of woke indoctrination. They attacked public schools, labeled teachers as villains, and dismantled diversity efforts in universities, all while a large majority of Americans on the right cheered them on. These voices celebrated the defunding of schools and the undermining of teachers, embracing policies designed to weaken public education. Now, Musk and Ramaswamy claim America lacks skilled workers and demand more H-1B visas to fill the gap. At the same time, Ramaswamy has criticized mainstream American culture as mediocre and incapable of producing excellence. But this critique ignores a fundamental truth. The mainstream culture they speak of, a culture built on exclusion and privilege, has never represented everyone. For Black Americans and other marginalized groups, the reality has always been different. We have lived in an America that demanded we be more capable, more resilient, and more extraordinary, just to access opportunities others took for granted. Musk's recent tweet about America rising to greatness over the past 150 years because it was a meritocracy exposes another layer of this hypocrisy. America during much of that time was anything but a meritocracy for Black Americans and other marginalized groups. Musk's claims ignore the reality of slavery, segregation, redlining, and systemic racism that denied millions the ability to access opportunity. The so-called merit-based system Musk celebrates was, in reality, one that rewarded privilege while excluding those who were not white, male, or wealthy. Black American culture has never had the luxury of mediocrity.
Amazing. Good job. So if you want to read that, how much? I'm sorry, I'm coughing here.
No, you're good. No, that was
But
like about a third
okay.
third of what I wrote.
Okay. So
The
go to
rest,
insightnews.com and read the
right?
full article. That'll be
Right.
great.
Exactly. That's the rest of it. Like I said, it's about a third. The rest of it is on there if that caught your attention.
Super. Uh, if I have to check out for a coughing spell, I'm going to have you help me and just
No
keep
problem.
the
It's no
conversation going.
problem.
I've been
Yep.
a lot of people around me coughing lately.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It is
and
definitely the season.
yeah.
It's the season of the cold and the flu.
Mm-hmm. So you had a chance to work on the campaign, sort of bringing the Generation Z vibe to the story, the narrative that was unfolding. Let me ask you now, as a reflection, what's your analysis? What happened? Why didn't we succeed in placing Kamala Harris and our governor um, in the White House? What happened?
Right. I think that it's multifaceted. A lot of it is engagement in votes. Especially like you said, from the Gen Z, speaking from a Gen Z perspective, and as someone who has advised candidates on engaging the youth vote. I think a lot of that is that engagement, engaging Black women, engaging Black men, and engaging youth voters. Black women knew the role and turned out to vote, but there's still so much work that can be done in the areas of resonating with our struggles, resonating with our goals in our community, and getting in line with that in a way where it turns out the vote. And not the the Biden campaign, the Biden Harris campaign doesn't align with our values, but obviously the more vote that you can turn out, the better. If you compare how much voter turnout there was in the election of Biden, the first Biden administration, versus this in 2024, the election in 2024, the difference is huge as to who turned out to vote and who didn't. Just pure numbers, not even percentages and who they voted for and getting down to those details of votes, but truly just the number of total voters in 2020 versus the number of total voters in 2024. So I think,
how do you explain the difference?
I think a huge part of it is sexism. I really do. I think that when it came time to vote for a Black woman for president, there was a lot of people who didn't want to bring themselves to do that, and that definitely, it's a nerve, rubs me the wrong way. But to just boil it down to the facts, I think that's a huge difference between Biden running in 2020 versus Kamala running in 2024. And every time a woman has ran against Trump has won. But then when Biden ran against Trump lost. So I think that a huge difference there is just misogyny and sexism, and understanding that we do have a long way to go when it comes to gender equality and especially women's rights, and just kind of what Trump ran on, and his sexism in his campaign as well resonated with some people who maybe didn't vote for him or didn't vote at all in the last election, who did vote this time for him. So I think that's a huge difference there. It's just purely the fact that Vice President Kamala Harris, when she's running for president, she's a woman, versus 4 years ago with the Biden administration when he was running for president in 2020, he's a man. So I think that's a huge difference as it is. And like I said, voter turnout changed or lacked because of that.
So what's going to happen in the next election? Do you see Vice President Harris launching a new campaign? What's her status and standing as the leader of the party at the moment?
Right. Right. No, that's a good question. I definitely see that as a possibility. Her running again, especially since this is Trump's last, term. Definitely, we're gonna see a lot of shifts as to who will be the Republican nominee, and I think that impacts who runs for president, who's a Democratic nominee, and who wins, of course. So I think it would be wonderful if she ran again. But I think that it'll be really interesting to see who in the next 4 years comes into their power and comes into the arena and throws their name in the hat.
What do you think the end game is for the Republicans? What will they say will have been a successful 4-year run? Here's what's in my mind. I'm thinking that the power brokers, the money men, primarily the billionaires that are driving the agenda, have a global agenda of establishing a cult of what's the right word for it? It's not even leadership. It's the autocracy, plutocracy. What do you call it? But a money, techno money power machine. They are not worried about nations, or about ethnicities. They are worried about who they are. And from my point of view, just as an observer, they want to cut the deals with other men who have the same access to power and the same willingness to use it. And they suffer ordinary people to the degree that ordinary people can view and support and offer themselves as grist for their mill. But they, I believe, and our job, I believe, is to illuminate the abomination of their intent and of their will to destroy our humanity And in the doing, or the pathway to doing that, is destroying the premise and the promise of democracy in this
Right.
country. They're starting there, but that's not the end game. The end
Right.
game is creating a system of power and control that's global, that puts massive, unreasonable power into the hands of few, and a hierarchical system that is not beneficial to human beings, nor to the environment,
Right.
nor to the cosmos. That's what I say. What do you think?
Right. No, I echo what you said. I do think a successful term for them is what they're saying. I do think that they are honest in what their intents are, and what they're speaking is what they want. So we see Project 2025, we see what they post, what they say in their campaigns, when it comes to deportation, when it comes to the environment, when it comes to DEI, and when it comes to our education system and many other things. I do think that is what success would look like. I think that they want that wall built. I think they don't want DEI positions or administrations at all. I think that if they could, teach in the classrooms exactly what they envision is making America great again, then they would. And I think that our pushback is obviously one of the biggest reasons, our meaning everyone else, his pushback is one of the biggest reasons why we're not there yet. Why we're able to make steps forward in progress. And if you turn to history, you could see that's the exact same reason. It's even in the face of disappointment, you keep pushing forward. There have been court case rulings that come to my mind alone on the education system or on voting or on humanity that was certainly more than disappointing. But that doesn't mean that anyone stopped pushing forward or stopped fighting for equality or fighting for better. And but to answer your question, I do think that you hit the nail on the head. I think that is what success would look like to them. I think, like you said, in the realm of technology, they as much power as possible, and that's not just in America. So very interested in talking with and getting access to and power in other countries as well. But I definitely do still see hope, despite the fact that the next 4 years will be a bigger opportunity for them to push forward toward their ultimate success or their agenda. There's balance, checks and balances, and a process for everything. And I think that it'll be over in 4 years' time.
I think it'll be over in 2 years, more than 4. I think that, I have the sense that they are so greedy and so brazen
Yep.
that, and it's back to Donald Trump saying he could kill somebody on Fifth Avenue in broad daylight and nobody would care about it.
Yep.
And he seems to be feeling that he is being validated in that assessment by his ability to escape justice and the courts. Let me step back a second and talk about what does it mean that the courts have said, no, you're going to be sentenced. Explain what's happened in the past few days from a lawyer's point of view.
I mean, to just stay, there's a lot. There's a lot that happens. There's a lot happens in these proceedings, in these courts, and I feel like you can tell when you get the rulings, and they're like 98 pages long, that there was a lot to talk about and a lot that happened. But it's definitely, politics reaches the courts more than people think. It really does. Even the Supreme Court, it reaches a lot more than people think that it does. And the intent behind the Supreme Court and the fact that it's a life appointment was that politics wouldn't reach, that they wouldn't have to worry about campaigning or people pleasing, or anything. They could truly do what's just, what sits right with them and their morals, and what represents what should be done and what this country stands for. But it reaches a lot farther than I think a lot of people realize. And I mean, and that much is logical, as to how the Supreme Court justices, for example, get on the court in the first place is through a presidential appointment. So we see who different presidents appoint and their reasons, and then those justices' rulings. So it is a lot of moving parts, and you hear how some people say that the proceedings should wait until after the election, or it should happen before, because that's the way that the system works, and you don't get a delay for running for president. And other people suggest that it's impacting the results of the ruling. So there's a lot of moving parts, and it's good to read from various sources what's happening, because oftentimes it's really easy to get caught in one particular point of view or another.
Sure.
So it's really Yeah, especially when, like I said, when it comes to courts and their rulings, 98, 100-page rulings, there's going to be a summary somewhere to read too.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Conversation with Al McFarlane. My guest today, co-hosting with me today, is Haley Taylor Schlitz. She is an Assistant Attorney General at the state of Minnesota, the Office of the Attorney General. She is also a columnist for Insight News, has accomplished a lot as the youngest woman to ever finish law school, I think, in the country, and the youngest Black woman, or maybe Black person also, to start practicing law, I think.
Yes.
Those are pretty accurate descriptions. And now she's here and she was active. I've met her as a surrogate for the Biden, not the Biden, but the Harris Waltz campaign.
Yes.
That's where we connected, and we, from there, invited her to be a guest on the show. This is her third time here, but also to begin writing a column for Insight News. And
Yes.
as I said in the first introduction, she writes with fire and with clarity. And I treasure and I value the voice. And so what do we do? Haley, how does, which generation I'm in? Generation, I even forgot. I'm in the baby boomer generation. How do we ensure that we fulfill our obligation to Gen Z and the ones that follow you, so that there's a sense of both intentional connectivity, continuity,
Yes.
and that you and we both envision the meshing of a net that is forward moving, that the forward moving that we are describing is both generic and specific to our lived experiences, our historic experiences, but also our vision of what it means to be free in this country, what it means to live and walk in justice in this country, and what it means to be living and walking in a way that is consistent with nature, the environment, other human beings and living things, and with the continued evolution towards the highest potentials that all of us are part of. How do we make that connection so that you all hear us and that we hear you? What do you think?
Right. No, I mean, and I think this is a great follow-up to what we were just talking about, about the Trump and the sentencing and the he requested it be delayed and that was rejected and things like that. I was touching on the news and how it's important to fact check. It's important to read from just various sources. And I think that what you're doing, like Black media and Black businesses, things like that are so incredibly crucial. You pass on your wisdom, you provide platforms and open doors, and I think that is a huge role of older generations in general, baby boomers, Gen X, a huge role and a huge way to connect with the youth and a way to teach us, because we have a lot to learn and a lot to give. And same, you and your generation has so much to give to us, and so I think that's like the most important thing that I share with anyone who asks, how can we get youth voters out to vote, or how can I connect with the youth, or how can I, what can I do? Because a lot of people come to me and say how excited they are about the future, how inspired they are, and I think one of the biggest things as someone who's young that I crave from people who are older than me, any generation who's older than me, is sharing your stories, your wisdom, your experiences, because a way to move forward is to not repeat mistakes, and a way to move forward is to be able to see from a perspective that I don't have. You have a perspective of your experiences, a perspective of what you want to see from this country and from your mark on the world, what you have learned from your history and how you apply that to your day-to-day, your mistakes and your goals and your success. And how did you succeed? I can learn from that. How have you failed? How have you faced, barriers and overcome them? And I can learn from that too. And so I think that's a way that generations can connect, is that intergenerational just stories, communication, and understanding that there's a shared vision. And that way, when we're working together, when we're moving forward in what we know is right or what we want to see done, we have this shared goal. because you shared where you're coming from and what you see, and I can share what I see, and we can pass that beacon and take it even further because you shared your life and I can take that with me. So I think that's a huge, a really, really, like, it resonates with me. I can speak for myself and my generation. It really resonates when I hear stories, see the barriers overcome, see the successes and how they were done. That intergenerational communication is huge. I preach it everywhere I go.
So you mentioned that one of the things that sort of uh, is one of the factors in losing the election was misogyny.
Mhm.
Uh, how does misogyny show up as a factor in the Gen Z life? And so I'm watching TV a lot and watching the videos and the movies, and I'm frankly quite amazed at both the brilliance and the beauty, but also amazed at some of the stuff that seems way, way, way overboard uh, based on the so-called values that I grew up. And so, is that really a fair criticism of what I'm looking at, or is it should it be me criticizing me for living in a distortion or allowing a falsehood of the way things are to go forward that we have not lived up to, and that we've kind of blasted uh, to the side. I don't know that question. I mean, so what are the forces that define and describe Generation Z and younger generations, and how do those provide ethical, moral? Those terms might not be the right terms, but ethical, moral redemption, not redemption, but what's the right word? Ethical, moral uh, standing and standards
Yeah.
for the continued development of our people, take the air quotes off, humanity,
Right.
which is what I think our people
Right.
equates to. What do you think?
Right. Right. No, I think that's a great question, and I think that it definitely hits on our entire conversation really well. And the way I see it, misogyny, it's still like we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, alive and well. It still shows up in 2024 and
Mhm.
2025. And as someone who was a teacher, when I would teach about sexism, or
Mhm.
because I was a fifth grade US history teacher, so that's part of it, is learning about the women's rights movement and things. It's taught in a frame truly of history. Like, this is in the past, it's left in the past. No, it happened in the past, but it's still happening now. And
Mhm.
I think that's something that Gen Z is as we come of age and find our passions, our careers, and who we are, like you said, morally and just as a human. That's something that we've grown up with, and you realize. Although we were told, also there's a sense of realization too as you come of age, and especially with the gender issue, which is a huge issue for Gen Z, is the gender spectrum, and what it looks like and how that applies to the different laws and practices we already have in this country. So, for example, sports or restrooms or things like that, and how that applies and how we take that with us from what we already have, what we've already built, and what it looks like now that the recognition that gender as a spectrum is becoming more mainstream or more familiar for people. So that's definitely a huge issue, or a huge movement in Gen Z. Another
Let's sit
core
with that for a minute. That's a gender. How did you describe it? Gender conformity or
spectrum.
gender
Yeah,
spectrum?
yeah, yeah.
What does that mean? Let's talk about that. I mean,
No,
and how does it look to you? How do you describe it to yourself and among your peer group as distinct from what you have heard from us?
right. I think that for me, I identify as a girl, as a woman, and my pronouns are she, her. So I can speak to that and other people's lived experiences. Of course, I'm not discrediting. How I take it from my point of view is that gender is a spectrum. Sex is what you're born as. So you
Mhm.
have your sex as male or female.
Mhm.
But there are a lot of things that are male or female. Dogs have sex. Cats have sex. It's not. It's that's biology, and
Mhm.
no one's really arguing or saying anything in relation to that. Gender, though, is different from sex. Gender is what we've crafted based on sex. It is societal construction. And as society changes, what we build will change. And we've seen that in many other areas of society, many other practices, many other standards have shifted since 20 years ago, so much more certainly since 200 years ago. So as society changes, of course, what we create will change with society, and gender is one of them. People, it's a spectrum where I feel what you feel, and that's how you express yourself. And there's a difference between what you feel and how you express yourself as well. There are some people who are gender non-conforming, although their gender may be girl or boy. They are non-conforming in the sense of what society expects from them. In my personal opinion, I think that a girl or a boy could be whatever you want it to be, because back in 1920, for example, girls weren't allowed to wear pants. But that's not the case anymore. So I think that gender could be what you want it to be. If you're a boy and you want to wear a dress or a skirt, you could still be a boy and do that. If you identify
So
as a
let me
girl,
jump
that's
in
cool
there
too.
and talk about the question of power, because you used the words girls were not allowed.
Right,
To allow
right,
means to give permission,
right,
and it means that one person has the power to decide and another
right,
doesn't.
right,
And you heard me earlier talk about patriarchy.
right,
And so the question that I raise with me, and I'm raising it with you, sharing with you because it's on my mind, is how do we look at both the damage
right,
and the benefits of patriarchal systems, but are there other models
right,
that, consistent with a broader awareness of the spectrum of
hmm
ways we can show up,
right,
allow us to move away from the dogma of
right,
patriarchy, if that's what it is, I think it is, and move towards something else that is built on um, the idea of justice, number one, the idea of innovation, experimentation, exploring, of learning, of knowledge creation and knowledge sharing.
right,
And finally, that's built on the idea that there's value in understanding uh, configurations that are possible in
right,
existence.
right.
It's pretty big and pretty general. What do you think?
No, I think that's a good point. I want to circle back to the where you started with your question, is that power. Who says you're not allowed, and who are they to say that? And so I think that that's kind of where this all. I think this is where the foundation of the gender movement and the spectrum and the expression, where that comes from, is that if you want to dress a certain way, if you want to appear a certain way, express yourself a certain way, that's within your power. That's within your rights, to wear a dress or to wear a certain color, whatever it may be, and deeper than that, different surgeries. That's all within your decision making. And I think that alone, recognizing that a girl can be what you want it to be and a boy
Hmm.
can be what you want it to be, that there's not like the societal norms are just norms, maybe perhaps what most people do, but that does not mean that's what you have to do. And that can be anything from Taco Tuesdays to surgeries on your body. That does not mean that that's what you have to do. I think that's already a movement toward what you were asking about the patriarchy and about shaping it, fixing it, leaving it, just being able to address or recognize rather that people are different, and I think that in that comes the empowerment and individuality, where you can express yourself in the way that feels right for you, in the way that you like. We all have different styles. We all have what we think looks good, what we feel confident in, and that is empowering. And to recognize that you have that and that is yours to shape and to express, I think that already is working toward what your question just asked, and working toward better and deserving better for everyone in this country and in the world. But I mean, I think that's the core issue for Gen Z, along with other things that you hear like the environment or education and gun control, things like that. But all of that just having the conversation is already a step in your power and a step toward or away from rather the patriarchy.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Conversation with Al McFarlane. You're hearing a wonderful conversation with Haley Taylor Schlitz. She's an assistant attorney general and a new columnist, and I'd say a great columnist for Inside News. Keith Ellison is here. Keith Ellison is her boss. He's the Attorney General for the state of Minnesota. Keith, so glad you could make it. Thank you so much. And jump in this conversation. I know that you and I had shared text a while ago, just giving some updates. So I'm going to drop it over to you right now. And what are the things that are first and foremost on your mind that people need to know about both our national picture, the election and the outcomes? Haley and I have talked about it, but also what it means for Minnesota and how we are going to be challenged to move the needle forward without the advantage of the trifecta that we had before. Keith Ellison.
Yeah. And hey, Haley, good to see you. Here's the thing. Within about 13 days, we're going to see the inauguration of a new president, same president who served before. In the time that he has been a public personality, he's never wavered in his core commitments to be against immigrants from Latin America and Africa, not necessarily from Europe. He seems okay with those, but everywhere else, he doesn't really want you here. And he's been real clear. I mean, he's been sued for racial discrimination in housing as a landlord. He's said that he wanted to execute the Central Park Five. I mean, he's openly said he's against DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And by the way, it's against the law to tell somebody they cannot have a job, an apartment, an opportunity because of their race. That's already something that's illegal. DEI is the opposite of that. It's trying to include people who have been excluded. It's not preferential at all. So the thing is, he's hostile to the idea of an inclusive America. By the way, he's against affirmative action only for people who've been denied opportunities over time. He's okay with it for people who can buy a chemistry wing at Harvard for their underperforming child, and he's more than happy to have legacy get benefits as well. So so this is the world we're walking into. We're walking into it, and last time we could count on him being surprised that he won. We could count on him having some people in his administration who served because they believed that they needed to protect the country from him. And I'm talking about people like General Mark Milley. I'm thinking about other people who were in the administration who I know who may not be your progressives, but they do care about the people of this country and we're willing to try to say, we're not going to do that, you know? But now he's hiring incompetent people for a very strategic reason, and that is they owe loyalty only to him. Where else is a guy like Blake Masters, who's going to be head of the ATF, going to get a top administrative post? He said that yes, America has a gun problem. It's black people, frankly. He did run for the Senate. He did lose, but he's now going.
I think we lost Keith there for a second. I'm sure he'll come right back in a second to refresh.
He hit the nail on the head. He really did. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly, I mean, and like we were just talking about that too. It's funny because we were just talking about issues like gun violence and how prominent it is for Gen Z, especially growing up with school shooter drills and things like that, you know, and how oftentimes the issue is blamed on African Americans, the Black community, and they care more about their guns than they do the citizens. Yeah. Yeah.
Hopefully Keith will be joining us back in a second. Probably a glitch in the internet here. Again, Michelle, thank you for your comments. We appreciate you. You are acknowledging that Sister Haley's right on point. This is a great conversation. And, you can share this conversation after it's over. Just go to YouTube, capture it, and pass it through your networks on Twitter or LinkedIn or elsewhere. And this is the beginning of our new season. So this is show number 1 of our 2025 live season. And we're happy to be here, happy to have this platform and to be in company with you. I think I see Keith coming back on right now, maybe, maybe not, we'll see. So the question that you and I were talking about then is sort of differentiating Gen Z. And I'm wondering how you will move with the opportunity. How do you move with the obligation to stand for dignity and freedom in an information environment that is pervasive and expansive in its effort to minimize the impulse to justice and freedom?
Right.
Here's Keith back. Let's jump back in.
Yeah.
Keith, we lost you for a second there. Oops.
Sure, where I cut out, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying that we're prepared to protect the people's rights of the state of Minnesota.
Okay.
We've been working since last March, anticipating that he could win. Now that he has won, we're not flat-footed, right? But we should recognize that Trump, he's not flat-footed either. He's not surprised that he won. He didn't win by nearly as much as people want to claim that he did, but he did have a sense that he was doing well in the polls, and he was right. And so I think we should just be ready for another 4 years. But I think this could be a great moment in American history.
What do you
because let me tell you, like after Reconstruction ended in 1877, we saw a moment of freedom that was then snuffed out. By the year 1901, you didn't have any African Americans in Congress at all. On my wall in my office, I got a picture of the first Black Caucus. And there was around, 7 or 8 guys who were in Congress, no women, unfortunately, but they were there. By 1901, there were none, and there were not any until 1936. But then the movement started again. It wasn't, the movement started in the streets, in the communities, in the farm communities, and we had legal representation, people like Charles Hamilton Houston, Thurgood Marshall, then the popular struggle with MLK, and we know what we talk about as the 60s. We now are in a moment of backlash, right? In 2013, we saw Shelby County gutting the Voting Rights Act. We just saw gutting of the affirmative action. We just saw gutting of a number of rights that people came to enjoy. A woman's right to choose, been around since like the early 70s. And so we're in a moment where people are losing rights. But I think I can feel people gathering, people ready to reassert themselves in a whole new way, that we're not going to go back to the days of Jim Crow and segregation, no matter what these people might want to have in store. And I see them inspiring people. I see buyer's remorse already. But I think we need to keep in mind that, we didn't really understand. We kind of operated on the belief that the bad old days of Jim Crow segregation, sexism were gone. And the truth is they're never far away from trying to reassert themselves. Right.
But is the difference, Keith? This is my feeling, is that the vibe on the street is, as you said, we're not going back, number one, and ain't nobody scared.
No.
Ain't nobody scared. So they portrayed that we were fearful. I don't think we were fearful then. We just didn't have the information system that elevated our conversations so that we could be on an accord in a very public way, though we were neighborhood by neighborhood and house by house. But we have the technology now that connects us in ways we've never had before. And if we say, ain't nobody scared, that's what it means. Ain't nobody scared. And any street we know goes 2 ways. If you can bring it, if it comes this way, it can go that way.
Yeah, well, we got to convert that courage into organization. And you mentioned technology and telecommunications. That's a vital tool of communication. And we got to really organize, come together, formulate, plan, push back. And I'm just going to say this. Haley and I are lawyers. lawyers have a tendency, not all the time, but we have a tendency to think, well, we'll settle it in the courts. Well, you know, the best lawyers I know understand that you need some popular support too. The
Right.
best lawyers I know will tell you that. I mean, Johnny Cochran would have told you he needed people in the street talking about fair trial, and Thurgood Marshall would have told you he needed the NAACP network leadership to say we got to have our rights and the popular
We're
support.
down to
You
about
don't have
10
to be in the
seconds.
courtroom. You don't have to be in the courtroom to stand up for what's right.
10
And
seconds.
we need
Keith,
everybody.
Keith, 10 seconds. What's the last marching order today?
Organize, get involved. It's always darkest before the dawn, but if you will unite with your people, you can have a brighter day.
There we go. Haley, last word.
You know, protect the right to vote. Gen Z isn't scared. We're going to turn out. We're going to follow suit. We're ready.
There we go. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.